This is Spain, the sixth largest economy in Europe. Spain's economy is often looked at as a constant runner-up to more leading European economies, like Germany and France. It's usually compared with Italy and Greece, two other southern European economies that have similar major issues of very high debt to GDP, consistently high unemployment, and low productivity. Before the 2008 financial crisis, Spain's economy was rather impressive, even for European standards. Spain's economy grew around 1.4% higher than the EU average since 1996. The government's debt was at one of its lowest levels at 35.8% of GDP in 2007, after decreasing every year since 1996. Its entry into the world's largest free trading economic zone and adoption of the common European currency were key points of optimism in Spain that the future was prosperity along with the rest of Europe. The economy thrived, driven by immigration and low interest rates, both fueling the country's economic expansion, and predominantly its real estate sector. Unemployment hit its lowest level in 30 years at a remarkable 7.95%. A figure that marked a powerful symbol of Spain's growing economy. In fact, the Spanish labour market performed so well that 33% of all the employment created in the EU15 in the last 10 years leading up to the global financial crisis was created in Spain. It really seemed that being a worker in Spain might mean that in a few years you'd have a higher salary than someone living in France or even Germany. This was reflected in the country's net migration, where Spain used to be a place where people would leave for a brighter future, but in the period between 2000 to 2007, Spain was the EU's largest recipient of migrants. The success extended to Spanish companies who were on a purchasing spree. In 2006, Spanish FDI abroad increased by 113%. In fact, in the same year, Iberdrola, a Spanish electricity provider, bought Scottish Power, creating Europe's third largest utility provider. This was one of many significant takeovers in that year by Spanish companies. Spanish companies were beginning to dominate European markets. Spain was living the high life. Definitely the crown jewel of the Spanish economic dream was the real estate market. Changes in zoning regulation and liberalised building permit policies established in the late 1990s, combined with weak regulation on lending, all combined to facilitate a massive increase in real estate prices. Although the construction of new homes grew strongly, their prices grew even more. Housing prices grew exponentially, tripling in value between 1995 and 2008. This led to a repeating loop in which confidence that house prices would continue to grow became a fact. Banks lent more generously with the guarantee of the house if a loan went bad, and people would invest massively over leveraged positions into real estate. This points to another issue. Despite the government's debt to GDP ratio being healthy, the private sector couldn't say the same. Spain's firm credit to GDP ratio grew from 0.5 in 1995 to more than 1.25 in 2010. There's no doubt that the majority of this credit growth went to fueling the real estate sector, which only ballooned in value.
Are you tired of dealing with slow-loading websites and endless hosting headaches? It's time to upgrade to Kinsta, simply better hosting. Kinsta is the ultimate web hosting solution for businesses that rely on their WordPress sites to thrive. With Kinsta, your site can run up to 200% faster just by switching. No extra work required because they'll take care of migrating your sites, completely free. But it's not just about speed. Kinsta offers enterprise-grade security with firewalls, DDoS protection, automatic SSL certificates, and even malware removal, at no extra cost if your site is ever hacked. Their user-friendly dashboard, called My Kinsta, makes managing your site a breeze, and with expert, human-only support always available, you can focus on growing your business while Kinsta handles the rest. Right now, new customers can get their first month of managed WordPress hosting completely free on selected plans. Don't forget, Kinsta takes care of migrating all of your sites for free. Just go to the link in the description or scan the QR code to get started today. Now, back to the video.
There were other signs of distress. Productivity in Spain grew at an average of only 0.3% in the decade leading up to the financial crisis. That's a worryingly low level. People working temporary jobs reached a staggering 33% of total employment. This begs the question, why is Spain so synonymous with high unemployment? Some would point out that Spain has the second highest number of school dropouts in the EU, and that no one wants to hire someone below 18, especially in an environment of already high unemployment. However, there's an even bigger reason as to why Spain has consistently higher unemployment than most EU countries, or most countries around the world even. During the rule of the dictator Francisco Franco, Spain adopted strict labour regulations, including not allowing labour unions or social security benefits. But instead, he substituted them with strict regulations on the definition of work and made it difficult to fire workers. After the death of Franco in 1975, the country underwent a political and economic transformation to democracy and an open economy. Franco's strict labour regulations were to remain, however, and on top of that, unions and social security benefits were to be added. All in all, Spain created an extremely rigid labour market that essentially encourages informal work or unemployment. Spain was also extraordinarily exposed to the global financial crisis to come. Family indebtedness in Spain reached a record 115% of disposable income in 2006, meaning any significant rise in interest rates or a decline in housing prices, which was the dominant form of collateral, could be disastrous for the economy. As for the large and successful economy, the construction and housing sectors combined represented almost a fifth of the entire economy, 18.5% of GDP. Essentially, the economy was standing on a shaky foundation. In 2008, the debt-fueled dream turned into a nightmare. Spain entered a 6-year recession, with GDP per capita contracting anywhere between 1 to 5% annually until 2014. Unemployment rose to a peak of 27% by the end of 2012. The economy had broken. The government, who was facing general elections in spring 2008, was refusing that the financial crisis was having any significant effect on the Spanish economy. The construction industry, once seen as a pillar of the country's labour market, saw unemployment almost double. When the government did finally acknowledge the crisis, its revenues had been hit hard by drastically reduced consumer confidence and skyrocketing unemployment. To help recharge the economy, the government announced a massive €8 billion infrastructure project. The result of decreasing revenues and massive infrastructure projects was the beginning of Spain's journey to a very high debt-GDP ratio. The government also took the approach of many other European governments at the time of austerity starting in May 2010. There was a widespread belief in Europe at the time that these financial crises are a result of government financial mismanagement, and by increasing taxes and decreasing government spending, the government can increase confidence and thereby recover the economy. Spain's government financial situation before the crisis was actually fine, with government debt to GDP at 36% before the crisis, a much better position than most European countries, and it actually worsened dramatically with austerity, partly because the economy shrank, which would make the government's increasing debt seem even larger when compared to the economy. Unfortunately, this didn't work neither at improving the country's sovereign debt position, nor at stimulating the economy, and Spain never returned to its pre-crisis economic level until 2019. A big reason for this massively prolonged recovery, compared to Germany for example, who recovered by 2011, was a loss in competitiveness. Many economists point to the fact that the entire Eurozone sharing one exchange rate gives different advantages and challenges to economies depending on their current situation. Let's do a quick recap. If an exchange rate's devalued, It would make the country's exports more attractive and would help stimulate an economy at the cost of the currency's purchasing power. Essentially, it would help create more employment, but hurt the real income of those already employed. The opposite is also true. If a currency appreciated in value, its exports would be more expensive for foreigners to buy, but the local consumers could afford foreign goods more easily and have a higher real income. You can see how the high value of the euro would benefit Germany, who consistently has a much lower unemployment rate compared to Spain, and would rather have a more valuable currency to increase the purchasing power of its workers, whereas Spain would appreciate a lower valued euro to reduce its unemployment rate. Another sign that Spain didn't have enough monetary stimulus is that its inflation rate, while averaging around 3% pre-crisis, dropped significantly after 2008, even reaching deflationary levels between 2014 to 2016. Nowadays, some might think that situation is ideal, but deflation is a very dangerous situation to be in, especially if it's prolonged like in Spain's case. Deflation means that consumers would rather hold onto their money as prices are going down. Firms might have to start firing workers since the real value of their wages is going up without anything happening, and they're likely facing less consumption. Debt becomes harder to pay back since money is becoming more valuable, and you get the point. Deflation begins a terrible cycle and is usually hard to get out of. Now, fast forward to post-COVID Europe, and the major issue on all European minds is the rising cost of living, especially the rising cost of housing and energy. Relative to other European nations, Spain is performing very well. Its infamous government debt to GDP ratio has been falling consistently since its peak in 2020. Inflation is stable at 3%, and its economy is growing at 3 times the pace of the Eurozone. Spain is also experiencing much stronger wage growth compared to other major European countries, partly due to increases in the minimum wage as well as declining unemployment. Spain's success post-COVID can be attributed mainly to relatively lower energy costs, tourism, foreign investment, and government spending. Spain benefits from much lower energy costs compared to Germany, France, the Netherlands, and other European nations that have had their industries and workforce hit hard by a sharp increase in energy prices recently. This is mostly explained by the fact that Spain is much less dependent on Russia for energy, and so has seen pretty stable increases in energy prices. Spain's tourism industry is also experiencing a boom, with an increase of more than 9% in international tourists in 2024. Tourism has historically been a main driver of the Spanish economy, and after a tough hit from COVID, it is recovering and even surpassing pre-COVID levels. Spain is also a major recipient in aid from the EU and has received 48.3 billion euros in aid so far from the EU to aid in post-COVID recovery. In terms of foreign investment, Spain has been the 6th largest recipient since 2019. It even tied in first place with the US in terms of renewable energy projects. All this is to say, Spain has secured confidence with global investors. Domestically, however, firms are still concerned about the country's fractured politics and are more hesitant about investment. Government spending has also been a major source of fuel for this economic growth. Experts estimate that as much as 59% of the growth since 2019 has been supported by increased government consumption, a point that the opposition uses as an argument against the current government's rule. However, considering a declining debt to GDP ratio since 2020, and that the spread in yields between Spanish and German bonds, a measure of how much riskier Spain is compared to Europe's benchmark, is at its lowest level in 2 years, indicates that investors are not worried. The country's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said, "I can say that Spain is living an extraordinary moment," noting that Spain is now a leading engine of European economic growth. All in all, despite a major slump in economic performance after the global financial crisis, Spain is now on track to grow relatively faster than any other major European economies. The main indicators, GDP per capita, unemployment, inflation, debt to GDP, all indicate that Spain has a brighter future ahead of it.